Right. So, welcome to everybody to the to this next iteration of the CSC webinar series, where we'll look a bit deeper into how automation can be used to provision cloud resources. And this time around, we'll be provisioning a virtual machine, whereas in my last webinar, I was kind of pre-installing the virtual machine using the OpenStack Horizon UI. So this will be more end-to-end provisioning of cloud resources. We'll be using the automation tool Ansible to do the work of creating the VM and installing the software stack to it end-to-end. And at the end, we'll also delete resources and let's see if we can also build something extra into the presentation. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be using project that is readily available in CSC GitHub. The CSC GitHub organization name changed a week ago or so, so it's nowadays called CSC FI, and this particular demonstration can be found under the CSC FI/POTA Ansible demo repository. So I have this checked out, and we're going to do a little bit modified version of the demonstrator. But before we go into the details, a couple of mentions about the prerequisites. We're going to need Ansible, at least 2.0 for this demo. We're going to need Python for sure. We're going to need OpenStack command line tools, for which I've used brew and pip in this case to install this. So I've installed Ansible via homebrew and the rest via pip. And your mileage may vary. You can install these in via any packaging framework you might consider to your liking. We're going to need a library called Shade to do some OpenStack related provisioning calls to the API. We're going to need access to the cPOTA service for sure. And as you can see, I have already logged in there. So that's taken care of. We're going to need something called the OpenStack RC file. So this is something that defines the API endpoints of your project, where all the API calls will be headed to. And last but not least, we're going to need an SSH key for actually accessing the server that we're going to be creating during this demonstration. So perhaps we'll go kind of a pre-flight checklist before we start. We have Ansible 2.220. We have the OpenStack command line tool available. And I have taken the liberty of pre-downloading my OpenRC file, but if you're new to the process, it's no biggie. You just go into your project's access and security menu, thusly, and then open the API access tab, and from here on you can download this OpenRC file to your local computer. So it's effectively a matter of doing a source OpenRC file. Then you are asked your OpenStack password, and after doing that, you can, for example, do OpenStack server list, and thus you're able to see the virtual machines currently provisioned into your project. So I have all my prerequisites set up, and this time around we are gonna do still use one single playbook, but let's now look a bit deeper into the playbook structure on how things can be organized in an Ansible playbook, whereas the last demonstration was more like on-off installation of one piece of software, and that was more or less it. So we're going to utilize a playbook that has 2 or 3 sections, or so-called plays in Ansible terminology. The first section of the playbook will create this virtual machine on cPOTA. So effectively for this play, I'll be using an inventory that has my local laptop as the target. The next section of the play of the playbook will configure a VM that is created in the first section. So in this case, we're going to switch to an inventory that has a remote floating IP instead of this local laptop connection. Then we're going to install some software there and see where we end up with. If there's time, we're also gonna install a certificate for this web server so that we can make sure that our communication to the server are encrypted with HTTPS. So if you check out this repository, Pota Ansible demo, you'll get a directory structure like what is seen here on the GitHub page. So the most important attachment point for our purposes is this demo.yaml. This is what we will be running, and the rest is more or less details that we can look further. If you consider the standard Ansible playbook structure, I got this directly from Ansible's documentation. There's typically some kind of inventory file. So we're not going to use those. We're going to create an inventory on the fly. So this will be a bit sparser example than the examples on Ansible.com. There are variables that you assign to specific groups of hosts or specific hosts individually. In this case, we'll just target the laptop or the VM, and I don't have any special variables that would, let's say, warrant dedicated variable file, so we're not going to use those either. Just to give you an idea that what we're going to do. Dynamic inventory-ish. No group, host vars. If you're big into Python coding, you might want to code your own Ansible modules. We're definitely not going to do that today either, but we are going to use this demo.yaml, which is the main playbook to provision our service. So that's going to be our attachment point, and or the start for the demo. And going a bit further into how Ansible playbook could be organized, a crucial element is so-called roles. So if you put your variables and your secrets and other project-specific items into the playbook main level, roles are there then something very generic and reusable. So you can find very, very many good roles in GitHub, in Ansible Galaxy that the community has produced for people's perusal. So let's see, we might end up using an example role today. But the most focus point of this presentation is using the single playbook to provision a virtual machine and then run a web service on top of that. So let's get things up and running. I need to have an SSH agent running for storing my keys. And here I've already created a test key, but I'm gonna do a new one because this is more or less throwaway. So I'll poke quickly into the SSH directory. Let's delete this one and some previous test keys. So I'm gonna do a Nova key pair add. So I'm effectively gonna add myself, or let OpenStack add myself a new key. Let's call it test2, for example. Like so. And now I have an identity called test2 on the OpenStack server side and a private key called test2.priv on the client side. Just need to modify the rights permissions to a bit more stricter so I can use that. So let's add that key to the agent. This time around, this is a throwaway demo key, so I'm not protecting it with a password. Right, then we can go to the checked out Git repository, the Pota Ansible demo one. Let's also increase the font a little bit. And we can start then running things. Let's close. That was just for informational purposes. So this is what a playbook looks like. This was partially covered already in the previous webinar, so I won't go into all the nitty-gritty details of the syntax. In this playbook, there are some things that need to be customized for stuff to work. So first of all, we need to reference the correct key. In this case, it's called test2, so I'm updating this here. And there needs to be a so-called firewall security group definition. So here I'm selfishly calling it demo SG Unosia according to my name. And I think I did a test run that left security group like this hanging. So just for cleanliness' sake, let's also delete that one. So we start from a more or less clean slate. There we are. So the way I decided to approach this is I've commented out the majority of the playbook at the moment, and I'm going to do individual runs one step at a time to do incremental progress. So the first thing in the playbook is adding of the security group rules. We are going to create a virtual machine, and we are going to need firewall rules to be able to access the machine. So I've made this really easy this time around. We're going to open SSH port 22, HTTP port 80, and if we have time, we're also going to enable HTTPS. So we need the firewall opening also for 443 port. Without further ado, let's read the fine documentation. To launch the demo, we need to run Ansible playbook demo.yaml. So that shouldn't be too hard. And here Ansible does a silly thing. It's looking first under generic Ansible host directory, and in fact I don't like this bit, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna define an inventory on the fly that only consists of local host. That way we can limit the scope of Ansible and make sure that it only accesses one host and nothing else. So I interrupted that, and let's rinse and repeat. So now it's starting to create these security groups. Moment of truth. That worked. So something has changed. Ansible is denoting that with a yellow color whenever something changes. If you do consecutive runs, most likely these will appear as green because there's nothing that has changed from the previous state of where the playbook run finished. All right, that's good. So now what we're going to do is uncomment the following sections of the playbook. This is creating a virtual machine and then doing a kind of test that did it succeed, and then registering some results based on this. And if all goes well, as it never goes, but we'll see. This time around, the first steps of creating the security group should be visible as green. So nothing changed this time around because the firewall rules for 22, 80, and 443 were already in place. So now we get to the step of creating a virtual machine, and perhaps I'll move the window to the other side and refresh the Horizon Web UI at the same time to see that, yes, indeed, a new virtual machine has started to spawn here on the Horizon side with the key pair test 2. And here I'm using the standard CSC built, CSC provided CentOS 7 virtual machine image. That went through, and there's some shenanigans here related to the virtual machine creation where we're adding some artificial delay to make sure that we get the results registered. So that worked. Great. At this point, we should in fact no, it doesn't have a. Oh, it does have the floating IP. we should be able to already log into the machine. So I'm pretty sure I have this IP address in my SSH history. So let's clear that first. And then let's do a SSH cloud-user at the IP address, where cloud user is the default username for the CSC built images. And sure enough, we will able to log in. So here we have, was it four CPUs available, which is corresponding to the standard, no, one CPU available, sorry, corresponding to the standard tiny virtual machine type. Good, then we can proceed. So the next portion of the playbook is about adding the host to a so-called inventory. So this is where we create, in a sense, a new inventory group alongside the existing one where the laptop is referenced. So we store the auto-allocated IP address retrieved from the previous run, and then we add the host to an inventory group called new in this case. Not very imaginative, but it works. Then there's a known host cleanup thing that is handled automatically here. I did it manually because I wanted to make sure that I can log into the host manually just for show purposes. And then it's waited that the instance can be truly accessed. So that being reviewed, let's give it a spin. And Ansible has a lot of smart properties that allow you to skip or omit certain things in a play. You can, for example, tag individual plays and reference that tag only if you want to emphasize on a particular spot in a playbook, or you can make logic. Let's say you can define that a play creates something. So if that something, be it a file or a directory, has already been created, then the same work is not done twice. So it's kind of acting in a smart way. Okay, so it reached the last part. Wait for instance to be ready. I think I added a delay here, so it's waiting a bit for nothing. Regardless, let's wait and peek again at our agenda. So we're getting close to accomplishing what we wanted from this play one of this webinar, and thus we did. So the instance is now ready and accessible. So now we can proceed to the second part of the webinar and the playbook. So if you noticed, I'm using a YAML syntax file, so that's the de facto in Ansible. And whenever there's something here at the top level of the hierarchy, that's effectively an individual play. So one play was called Create Virtual Machine on cPOTA, and the next play is going to be called, wait for it, Configure Demo Host. So let's take a little bit of closer look what's going to happen next. We are going to run a new play. This is going to affect the hosts called new, and here we have a kind of a dependency of the previous play, so we do need to run that as well. So Ansible has a concept of what this new might mean and awareness of it. We're still going to use the same remote user called cloud user. We're going to sudo to root, so we use this become yes stanza. And now there are some variables here that we can define. So perhaps at this point we'll customize this a little bit. Let's say hey there attendees of April 11th webinar. CSC webinar, and greetings from Kajaani. So customize that. Next up, we're going to install software. So web server, I'm using the CentOS image. So in this case, I'll use yum module of Ansible, where the only parameters that I need for installing a package are the package name, in this case HTTPD, and the state for the package, which will be present if we want it installed to begin with. There's going to be a definition of the web page. So we are using a Jinja 2 template for this. Let's take a look at the playbook structure. I have the template here, and I decided to pimp it a little bit. So it's Finland 100 years year at the moment ongoing. So I decided to put the color of the Finnish flag there for font color, and also make the text a little bit like overlay on top of this picture of Kajaani that you will hopefully see later on. But apart from that, no further modifications to what's there in the GitHub. We're going to use an Ansible module called copy, just to do a raw copy of this local picture file of Kajaani to the remote server. So previously was referencing to the template module, which is taking a look at these Jinja variables, for example, demo photo and demo greeting, and populating them based on the variable information that Ansible knows. And the last bit of this play will be starting Apache. So if you're taking a look at the GitHub code, there's a firewall D that is also being provisioned there for let's say extra security and extra granularity in terms of firewall rules. I decided to omit that to make a little bit leaner and cleaner presentation today, but that's also good practice if you want to add a firewall D or similar solution to your stack. So let's see how things pan out after enabling this part of the playbook. We have now place 1 and 2 enabled of my initial agenda presented here. And this time around, once we get to play 2, this local host defined in the first play should change to the floating IP address of the newly created VM. And we already tested we are able to access it, so I'm not expecting any issues, but we'll see. We'll see what happens next. And this is in fact a good opportunity for me to peek. Are there any questions in the chat? Not at the moment, but you are most welcome to ask them whenever you want or at the end of the presentation. And on the Pota web user interface, there's not much new to see. Right, so the first part of any play or its task portion is setup part. This can be skipped, but it's pretty useful. What happens during the setup is Ansible figure out a lot of stuff about the host, so IP addresses, disks, and other properties, be it physical or logical properties of the server. And looks like the setup in this case was successful, so we're moving on to the next portion of the play, which is installing the web server. Hopefully this won't take too much time, or at least it shouldn't take too much time. And also hopefully the repositories that we have pre-configured are not feeling sluggish at the moment or anything else like that. Doesn't look like it. So this means effectively that the HTTPD package was successfully installed by yum. Also, the Jinja 2 template was populated with the parameters that I provided to it, and the picture of Kajaani was also uploaded to the server. and the HTTP daemon was started successfully. So if we circle back to the start of the playbook, you notice that I did a kind of a catch-all rule, or opened HTTP port 80 to the whole world. So not only I, but also the webinar attendees should be able to navigate to this address 193.166.24.224 to check out the friendly message provided to the attendees of the April 11th CSC webinar. Just checking that the tint of the blue is correct. Yes, it definitely looks correct. And by the way, the picture you see on the background is Renforsin Ranta Park, where also the CSC data center is located. So that gives you an idea about the environment, about the physical environment where CPOTA is hosted. Good. So at the moment, it looks like we should have time also to check out this role thing. So for this, I'll reopen the playbook structure example I had here. So in addition to any YAML files that depict the playbooks, which also can be in a dedicated playbook directory, there's something called roles directory that can host, for example, content like this. In this case, it's a role called common that has tasks that get executed whenever the role is included in a play. There can be default variables for this role, for example here, and also other types of variables if you want to kind of arrange those in a hierarchy. There can be dependencies to other roles. So Ansible Galaxy, the tool which we'll use to install the role, will automatically take care of installing those dependencies for you. So you can build pretty even complex stacks with a modest amount of time by using pre-existing roles if and when their metadata definitions and so on are properly written. And just like in my play, I had a picture of Kajaani. There can be files like text files, shell scripts. There can be templates, and there can be handlers for restarting stuff or doing other types of things whenever a play finishes and a handler has been called. And of course, we're not limited to just one role, so there can be additional roles for whatever purposes you might want to run. But effectively, for the purposes of this webinar, I decided to include, or let's take a look at it on the editor, include something called Ansible role Let's Encrypt. So I've written a so-called requirements file, or I suppose written is an overstatement because it only contains the GitHub URL. But anyway, this is a reference to a Ansible role that will now install with a tool called Ansible Galaxy. So Ansible Playbook is the command you use for running the playbooks, and Galaxy is the tool you use for checking out all these prerequisites and dependencies and so on and so forth. So let's see. I have these in place already based on testing, so let's delete them so you can believe this is happening in real time. I'm going to run a command called Ansible Galaxy install -r requirements YAML, so the file on the left, and with an extra definition roles path equals roles, because for some reason Ansible doesn't allow us at the current version. I have it available to define the roles directory here. I think that's going to change in a future version, but let's just now accept this additional command line parameter. Well, that was fast. So the Ansible Let's Encrypt role was installed. This is a role that will provide us a certificate for the server. So if you took a peek here, you noticed that this is transported over vanilla HTTP and there's no kind of encryption in place to make sure that the transport for delivering the traffic would be secure. And HTTPS doesn't work at the moment because it's not configured. So let's try to correct that. We may get a demo effect. I haven't fully prepared this. This might not work, but if it doesn't, then it's also a good gives a good idea for the webinar viewers that what kind of challenges Ansible playbook running can occur, or what can occur there. So for this play number 3, if there's time, install certificate, and for the target we use the remote VM with the floating IP, same as before. So the idea here is that we'll use the Let's Encrypt role to issue a certificate signing request, send that over to the Let's Encrypt servers, hopefully have them give us a certificate that we can then use for the HTTPD daemon to provide kind of a to verify the authenticity of this server, that we are really who we claim to be while we are serving information from this server, as verified by the Let's Encrypt certificate authority, which is being trusted by more and more devices these days. So same thing, we'll run this against the host group new. We'll use the remote user cloud just as before. Here I'm doing a couple of dependency installations because I want to find out the host name of this particular POTA virtual machine. And I need a tool called dig for that. So I'm gonna dig the IP address of the server and then extract the A record, so the IPv4 address linked DNS fully qualified domain name from the answer. We'll see if that works. It did yesterday. Then what you saw before was in a so-called pre-tasks section. So Ansible playbook contains tasks, it contains roles, and by default roles are run before the tasks. And if you want to run something before roles are run, there's an option to run these so-called pre-tasks, as there is also an option to run these so-called post-tasks. So you have a fairly lax ability to select the order in which you run your stuff in Ansible. And here we get to the magic of putting this Ansible Galaxy installed role into use. So I simply took a look at the variables that need to be configured for this role. We can even take a quick peek at the GitHub page of that project. So here there's more information about the different parameters you can pass to this role. Not all of them are mandatory, so some might have some, say, default value. And here I've mostly gone with the example playbook that the author of the role has kindly provided. So what I did was use the already existing in the example webroot path. I added my own email address because that's required to be able to get the certificate from Let's Encrypt. And for this domain part, I'm using the A record that is being found out in the previous step. And there's also a cron or renewal hook that is being inserted. So whenever the certificate is renewed, this should restart the Apache. And as a last part, we have these post tasks. So let's enable those as well. Here I'm just using nothing fancy, the default Apache SSL configuration that gets enabled whenever you install mod SSL, as happens in this previous step. Let's get my tiling window manager nag screen out of way. So I installed this mod SSL in the previous step. As a result, the system should have ssl.conf, and there I'm inserting into the SSL certificate file portion the landing directory and location of the certificate, as well as the private key. After that, there's going to be another restart. I suppose we could do also a reload, but what the heck. And Also, I'm using as my very last statement of this play number 3, I'm using Ansible debug module, which is, well, of course, very handy for debugging, but also handy for conveying some information to yourself if you wish. So in this case, I'm presenting the URL of the fully qualified domain name prepended with the HTTPS URL prefix. So that's that. Let's see what happens. Everything should be now commented, not commented out, but commented in and at the proper depths of the hierarchy. Let's rerun the playbook and see what happens. Perhaps one thing I'll also mention at this point, that this whole Polta Ansible demo, it's not a sacred tome or something written into stone or anything like that. So it's a bit even clunky at the moment in terms of OpenStack technology. If there's interested participants in the webinar audience who think that, yep, that's being done in a stupid way, that could be done in a smarter way like this, please send us some pull requests, fork the demo, and create something smarter based on this initial demonstration. Or if you want to take this as a kind of a starting point for installing your own application into a dynamically spawned VM, go ahead. Feel free to fork this demonstration if you want. One thing before, as we wait for the demo to finish, one thing I have been raising in previous webinars, and one thing I'll also raise here as a thing, is cleanliness. So cleanliness is definitely a virtue. And whenever we're done today, I'm going to run another book called Demo Cleanup. And this is doing one of those stupid things I mentioned a while ago. It's referencing just the server name as a kind of a reference to the server for deleting the server or the virtual machine. This time around, I know the project I'm working in really well, and I know that there's not going to be other VMs called Pota Demo. I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on in the project, but for another type of project where there might be a lot of similarly named servers, you might want to figure out some other kind of solution. Here I'm effectively using the same OS server that was used in the first playbook, but with a statement absent for the state part. So I want to make sure that this particular virtual machine is absent, in other words, deleted. And here I'm using an Ansible clause when. And this is why I want to why I do this is I really want to make sure that the user is aware that he or she is really running the kill switch, so to speak. Okay, let's see. It may be that we got some kind of a demo effect. From 6 moves import filter. So this command is not succeeding at the moment. Let's see. Python. That works fine, so that's a bit strange. I don't know the internals of this role completely, so just for kicks, I'm going to try running it again. The not so smart approach. It's possible that something got cleared after the error manifested here. So let's see if we are successful in the of installing this Ansible provided Let's Encrypt certificate or not. Import error no module named 6 moves. So that is strange. This import failed during the playbook run, but worked just fine as I SSH'd into the server and ran the same thing from the Python command line. see if what else already was run in the role. So variables were included where it was detected that this is a CentOS based machine. So it's going to use variables from redhat.yaml file. It installs some dependencies. And in these dependencies, there isn't anything referring to the 6 library. Either. We shall see. We shall see. But yeah, just wrapping up with my comment about this demo cleanup playbook. What this means is that I really need to define this delete variable from the command line if I want to remove this server for sure. So it's kind of a kill switch that makes sure that the user is really aware that what he or she might be doing is detrimental to the virtual machine. So here's the thing. Something changed in Python setup tools. It might be that this role simply omits a step in the first run and then is able to do that step successfully in the second runs. Might be or might not be. Let's take a look here. Install depends, install virtual env. So yes, I think we now got past that where that error message occurred. And by the way, this is more or less business as usual. So if you're using Ansible roles that you download from the interwebs, there is no warranty typically. So if you get an error, please, especially if you can figure out why the error occurred, it might be a good thing to notify the developer of that role that you had this error, and even better, issue a pull request if you have the fix for it. But in this case, it looks like the Let's Encrypt role is progressing. It's getting to the, let's see, authenticator. More or less, some kind of a challenge is being provided to the Let's Encrypt servers. So put some file into the root of the website, then the Let's Encrypt side backend servers will check that file, and if everything goes well, at the end of the day, we should have a good, healthy certificate in place. And then I'm also doing this, you see these line-in files here. I forgot to name these, so a bit sloppiness on my part. Most of the stuff you've seen today has a name. So for example, here I had install dependencies for yum. But I did this in a rush, so these are just called line-in file, the module name, so they also appear like this when the play is executing. So if I would like to have a little bit more details here, or like make the user more aware of what is going on, I could put, for example, add server certificate here. Okay, but the play finished successfully, so we got to the final words part. Let's see what happens if I then get this URL from here and go to the browser. Sure enough, we are seeing the same web page we saw previously, but now in a way that the Firefox browser is happy. So Firefox credential certificate store has a CA that kind of is aware of the Let's Encrypt CA, and thus we can be sure that the transport from our laptop to the server is secure. So this is of course just the transport part. If I would be malicious, I could install who knows what kind of a evil software here on the server side, but that's another story in itself. So we are now able to successfully provide serve this web page through a secure transport, and any other certificate authority could also be used if there's requirements for stuff like that. Okay, but then we have the kind of last part of the agenda, play 4. Cleanup. Because with cloud, it's ever so easy to create these resources on demand. Let's try something, let's install something, and also equally easy to forget them running. And we of course want to encourage our users to use the POTA cloud services in an efficient way, and that means that if you have claimed some resources and are not using them, it's very polite to purge those resources when you are done with them. So now I'm bluntly presuming that people don't want to look at this website anymore. So I'm going to run the Ansible playbook called demo cleanup, which we just saw, against the same inventory localhosts comma, and let's see what happens. Aha. What happens is I forgot the extra variable I was just saying to you that is required for the kill switch to work. So let's add that too. Extra variables are added like this, -e or -- extra bars. Let's put delete equals true. Waiting. At the same time, the Horizon user interface, has timed out. Yep, the POTA demo VM is gone from there. Good. So, that was more or less what I wanted to present today. End-to-end provisioning, dynamic provisioning of virtual cloud resources on top of the CSC POTA clouds in a way that everything is spawned dynamically, and then the software is installed or whatever actions are required inside the VM are done after that based on the dynamic inventory, and then cleanup is being done once everything is complete. So of course the logical next steps would be, let's say, to implement this kind of a workflow in Travis, Jenkins, other types of CI/CD systems, for example, running unit tests. So if you have some kind of software that you want to run periodically and test if it works, start from a clean slate, you could use, for example, playbooks like this to run that kind of testing in the POTA cloud. But really, how you implement this type of thing is completely up to your imagination. And of course, it's also a good thing to highlight that while we are using virtual machines as the underlying technology, everything I'm doing here at the moment could also be done with containers, and CSC is looking into the bright future of how we could also add containers into this type of workflows. But there's a lot of users who want to do this kind of are used to running Apache, are used to running their own Linuxes. So that's why we're kind of building incrementally in these webinar series, that we first show the kind of standard virtual machine type of thing, and hopefully going forward in the future we'll be able to provide more and more webinars with container orchestration and more lightweight resource management than virtual machines. Regardless, if you don't have any questions or comments right now, as Maria is posting into the ACP chat, we definitely appreciate your feedback, and you can give feedback about this webinar. You can propose further topics, and so on and so forth. We want to develop these webinars with the audience, so you definitely have a say in if you are interested about something that CSC is not covering at the moment. Let's try to bring it to the webinar agenda and see where we end up with. If nothing else, then I think it's time to say Thank you. See you next time.